It is the most expensive building in Australian history. 75 stories of black glass and steel pierce the Sydney skyline like a shard of obsidian. It cost $4 billion. But there is a problem. It cannot do the one thing it was built to do. This is Crown Sydney, a casino tower that is not allowed to operate as a casino. And the man who bet everything on it, James Packer, Australia's richest son, lost more than money. He lost his empire, his reputation, and damn near his mind. This is the story of how a billionaire's dream became a $4 billion monument to failure. The weight of the name. To understand how James Packer destroyed a $4 billion casino empire, you have to go back to 1991. Back to the moment a 17-year-old boy stood beside his father's hospital bed and made a promise he would spend the rest of his life trying to keep. Kerry Packer was dying, a heart attack, the big one, 9 minutes without oxygen. The doctors brought him back, but Kerry was never the same. And as he lay there recovering, he looked at his only son, James, and said something that would haunt that kid forever. Kerry said, "Don't sell the business." Kerry Francis Bullmore Packer was the richest man in Australia, a media mogul who had built an empire on television networks, magazines, and gambling. He owned Channel 9, the most profitable network in Australian history. He controlled Australian Consolidated Press. He had his hands in casinos, resorts, polo matches, and cricket rights. Kerry did more than play polo. He changed the rules of international cricket to make it more TV-friendly and more profitable. That is the kind of power he had. But Kerry was also a bully. A 6'3", 280-pound force of nature who terrorized employees, screamed at executives, and never let anyone forget who was in charge. He once told a British journalist, "You get one chance with me. One. If you are a friend, I am the most loyal friend you will ever have. If you are an enemy, I will make your life hell." James grew up in that shadow. Born on September 8, 1967, the heir to Australia's greatest fortune and its greatest burden. He went to Cranbrook School in Sydney, one of the country's elite private schools. He was smart, sensitive, nothing like his father. Where Kerry was loud, James was quiet. Where Kerry was confident, James was anxious. Where Kerry commanded rooms, James shrank from them. Kerry did not hide his disappointment. He called James soft, told him he would never survive the business world, pushed him into the family company, Consolidated Press holdings, not because he believed in the kid, but because someone had to carry the name forward. And after that heart attack in 1991, Kerry became obsessed with legacy. He had been dead for 9 minutes. He had seen something, or nothing, that made him realize his time was finite, and he wanted to make sure everything he had built would outlast him. So James, barely out of high school, went to work for his father. He started in the mailroom, then moved up through the ranks of the magazine division. Kerry made him learn every part of the business. No shortcuts, no favors. If James was going to inherit the empire, he had to earn it. Or at least, that is what Kerry told himself. By the late 1990s, James was running significant parts of the family business. He worked on the OneTel telecommunications venture, a startup that Kerry invested hundreds of millions into. It collapsed spectacularly in 2001, losing shareholders billions of dollars. James took the blame. The press destroyed him, called him incompetent. A rich kid playing businessman. Kerry did not defend him publicly. Privately, he probably agreed. But here is the thing about James Packer. He was tougher than anyone gave him credit for. Not in the way his father was tough, with bluster and intimidation. James was tough in a quieter way. He absorbed the failures, learned from them, and kept moving forward. And in 2005, when Kerry Packer finally died of kidney failure at 68 years old, James inherited everything. $6 billion. Media companies, real estate holdings, and most importantly, Crown Limited, Australia's largest casino operator. Carey had built Crown from the ground up, starting with the Crown Casino in Melbourne, which opened in 1994. It was the jewel of the Packer empire, a massive riverfront complex that became the largest casino in the Southern Hemisphere. James was 38 years old when his father died, and the first thing he did was broke his promise. He sold the media business, Channel 9, the magazines, all of it. Gone. $4.5 billion to private equity firms. The press called it a betrayal of Carey's legacy. James didn't care. He'd spent his entire life being told he wasn't good enough to run his father's empire. Now, he was going to build his own. And he was going to do it with casinos. Because James Packer had a vision. He'd watched Las Vegas transform itself from a mob town into a global entertainment destination. He'd seen Steve Wynn build the Bellagio and the Wynn. He'd watched Sheldon Adelson turn Macau into the gambling capital of the world. And James thought, why can't Australia do the same? Crown Melbourne was already printing money, over $2 billion in annual revenue. But James wanted more. He wanted to turn Crown into a global brand. He wanted resorts in London, Macau, Las Vegas. He wanted to be the next Wynn, the next Adelson. He wanted to prove that he wasn't just Carey Packer's soft son. He was James Packer, casino mogul. By 2007, James was making aggressive moves. He tried to buy Wynn Resorts. Sheldon Adelson blocked him. He invested heavily in Melco Crown Entertainment, a joint venture with Lawrence Ho, son of Macau casino legend Stanley Ho. The Macau properties became hugely successful. By 2011, James Packer's net worth had grown to over $7 billion. He'd more than doubled his inheritance in 6 years. And then he set his sights on Sydney. The Barangaroo Gamble. Sydney had a problem. The city was beautiful, global, one of the most recognizable skylines in the world. But it did not have a premium casino resort. There was the Star, a decent property in Pyrmont. But the Star was old and tired. Nothing that would compete with the mega resorts in Macau or Las Vegas. For James Packer, that was an opportunity. In 2012, the New South Wales government announced plans to redevelop Barangaroo, a massive waterfront site on the western edge of Sydney's central business district. 54 acres of prime real estate on Sydney Harbour, some of the most valuable land in Australia. The government wanted world-class development, hotels, offices, public parks, something that would put Sydney on the map as a truly international city. James Packer saw his opening. He proposed a casino resort unlike anything Australia had ever seen. A 75-story tower, the tallest building in Sydney, wrapped in black glass, designed by Pritzker Prize-winning architect Wilkinson Eyre. A 6-star hotel, fine dining restaurants, luxury retail. A VIP gaming floor catering to high rollers from China and Southeast Asia. No poker machines on the main gaming floor, only at the VIP level, making it feel exclusive and sophisticated, not like the typical Aussie pub pokies culture. This was an unprecedented pitch. The pitch was seductive. Crown Sydney would bring international tourists, create thousands of jobs, and generate hundreds of millions in tax revenue. It would be a statement, a declaration that Sydney belonged in the same conversation as Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai. A bold vision. But there was resistance. Lots of it. Anti-gambling advocates hated the idea. Local residents worried about traffic, crime, and problem gambling. Environmentalists did not want a casino on public waterfront land. The Star Casino, which had held a monopoly on Sydney gaming for years, lobbied aggressively against it. The resistance was fierce. James Packer fought back with everything he had. He hired the best lobbyists money could buy. He made campaign donations to politicians on both sides. He promised the New South Wales government a share of VIP gaming revenue, a sweetheart deal that would funnel millions into state coffers. He even agreed to fund a new harbour pedestrian bridge and contribute to public infrastructure improvements. He pushed with everything he could muster. In December 2013, the New South Wales government approved Crown's proposal. James Packer had won. The final contract was a 99-year lease on the Barangaroo site. Crown would build a 6-star hotel and a restricted gaming facility. The word restricted was key. Crown Sydney would not be a mass-market casino. It would cater exclusively to high rollers, wealthy VIP guests who would fly in from China, play baccarat for millions, and leave. The business model was simple: Chinese whales. China's economy was exploding. Chinese millionaires and billionaires were looking for places to gamble, to move money offshore, to enjoy luxury experiences unavailable in mainland China. Macau was the closest option, but Macau had limits. Australian casinos offered something different: a Western destination with easier visa access, better air quality, and a perception of safety. Crown's strategy was built on junket operators. These were middlemen, mostly based in China and Southeast Asia, who recruited high rollers, arranged their travel, extended them credit, and brought them to Crown's casinos. The junket operators took a commission on the turnover. Crown took the house edge on the bets. Everyone made money. Lots of money. By 2014, Crown's VIP international business was booming. Crown Melbourne and Crown Perth were pulling in over $1 billion annually from Chinese high rollers alone. James Packer's net worth hit $9 billion. He was dating Mariah Carey. He was on the cover of Forbes. He was living the life his father never thought he could. Construction on Crown Sydney began in February 2016. The project budget was set at $2.2 billion. It would take 4 years to build. The tower would open in 2020, just in time for Sydney's global tourism boom. James Packer had bet everything on this building. His reputation, his fortune, his father's legacy. Crown Sydney was going to be the crowning achievement of his career, the proof that he had surpassed Carey, that he had built something even greater than what he had inherited. But as the concrete was being poured and the steel was rising above Sydney Harbour, a disaster was already unfolding, a disaster that would destroy everything James Packer had built. It started with a knock on a hotel room door in China. The arrests that changed everything. October 13, 2016. Shanghai. The Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Pudong, one of the most luxurious properties in the city. Inside, 18 Crown Resorts employees were preparing for another day of recruiting Chinese high rollers. This was standard practice for Crown. Send staff to China, host events, wine and dine potential VIP gamblers, get them excited about flying to Australia and dropping millions at Crown's baccarat tables. Except this time, Chinese authorities were watching. At approximately 9 a.m., Public Security Bureau officers raided hotel rooms across Shanghai. They arrested 18 Crown employees, including 3 Australians. The charges were promoting gambling to Chinese citizens, a crime under Chinese law. The arrests were coordinated, simultaneous, and clearly planned. The Chinese government had been cracking down on capital flight. Billions of dollars were leaving China every year, much of it through Macau casinos and overseas gambling. President Xi Jinping's administration wanted to stop the bleeding. Foreign casinos sending employees to China to recruit gamblers was a perfect target. The news hit Australia like a bomb. 18 Crown employees arrested in China, detained without access to lawyers, facing years in Chinese prisons. At the center of it all was Crown Resorts, James Packer's company. The Australian government could not do much. China does not play by Western legal rules. The arrested employees were held for months without formal charges. Their families begged for help. The media covered every development, and James Packer, who had built his empire on Chinese high rollers, watched his strategy collapse in real time. In June 2017, 9 months after the arrests, a Chinese court convicted 16 of the Crown employees. They received sentences ranging from 9 months to 10 months in prison. The charges were gambling-related crimes. The message from Beijing was clear. Foreign casinos trying to lure Chinese citizens would be punished. The convictions sent shockwaves through the global casino industry. Every major operator with exposure to China, Wynn, MGM, Las Vegas Sands, they all pulled back their marketing efforts in mainland China. The junket model, which had been so profitable for so long, suddenly became toxic. For Crown Resorts, the damage was catastrophic. The arrest destroyed Crown's reputation in China. High rollers stopped coming. Junket operators, terrified of Chinese government retaliation, cut ties with Crown. The VIP international revenue that had been over $1 billion annually began to evaporate. And James Packer? He was spiraling. The arrests happened just as Crown Sydney's construction was hitting full speed. The project budget had already ballooned from $2.2 billion to over $3 billion. Cost overruns, design changes, delays. And now, the entire business model, Chinese VIP gamblers, was falling apart. But James had bigger problems than money. His mental health was collapsing. The pressure of the arrests, the media scrutiny, the financial stress. It all became too much. In September 2016, just weeks before the Shanghai arrests, James Packer abruptly resigned as a director of Crown Resorts. He cited personal reasons. Privately, those close to him knew he was suffering from severe depression and anxiety. James checked himself into a mental health facility in the United States. He underwent treatment for months. When he emerged, he was quieter, more withdrawn. The brash confidence he'd built after his father's death was gone. In its place was something else: fear, shame, the realization that maybe Carrie had been right all along. But Crown Sydney was still being built. 75 stories of black glass rising above Barangaroo, a monument to James Packer's ambition, a building that was supposed to save him. Instead, it would bury him. In December 2020, after years of construction delays and cost overruns that pushed the final budget to $4 billion, Crown Sydney opened its doors. The hotel was operational. The restaurants, the bars, the luxury suites, everything worked. Everything was beautiful. The views of Sydney Harbor were breathtaking. The design was stunning, but the casino floor stayed closed. Because just as Crown Sydney was preparing to launch, a government inquiry was digging into Crown Resorts, and what they found would destroy everything. The inquiry that destroyed him. Her name was Patricia Bergen. She was a former New South Wales Supreme Court judge. In August 2019, the state government appointed her to lead a public inquiry into Crown Resort's suitability to hold a casino license for Crown Sydney. The inquiry was supposed to be routine, a formality. Crown had been operating casinos in Melbourne and Perth for decades. They knew the rules. They followed regulations. Or so everyone thought. The Bergen Inquiry, as it became known, started hearing evidence in January 2020. From the very first day, it was clear this was not going to be a rubber stamp approval. The inquiry uncovered a pattern of failures so extensive, so systematic, that it became impossible to ignore. Money laundering, ties to organized crime, junket operators with links to Chinese triads, deliberately inadequate anti-money laundering controls, a corporate culture that prioritized profit over compliance. Crown's VIP gaming operations, the same operations that had made James Packer billions, were revealed to be a pipeline for dirty money. Criminals were using Crown casinos to wash cash. Junket operators with known connections to drug trafficking, human smuggling, and organized crime were bringing high rollers to Crown properties. And Crown executives knew. They knew, and they did not stop it. One revelation after another. Crown had allowed a single customer to deposit over $160 million through Crown bank accounts in suspicious transactions. When the bank flagged the activity, Crown pushed back, insisting the customer was legitimate. They were not. Crown had partnered with junket operators who were later arrested for kidnapping, assault, and running illegal gambling dens. Crown executives had been warned about these operators, and they ignored the warnings because the operators brought in too much money. Crown's anti-money laundering compliance was a joke. The inquiry heard testimony that compliance staff were overworked, under-resourced, and routinely overruled by senior executives who wanted to keep the cash flowing. And then there was China UnionPay. Crown had been using China UnionPay terminals, effectively credit card machines, to allow Chinese gamblers to access funds in Australia. But Chinese law prohibits using UnionPay cards for gambling. Crown knew this. They disguised the transactions as retail purchases, hotel stays, anything but gambling. It was fraud, deliberate and systematic, designed to help Chinese nationals evade their country's capital controls. The testimony was devastating. Crown executives squirmed under questioning. They claimed ignorance. They blamed rogue employees. They insisted they had fixed the problems. Patricia Bergen did not buy it. On February 1, 2021, Justice Bergen released her final report, 751 pages. The conclusion was damning. Crown Resorts was not suitable to hold a casino license in New South Wales. The company had facilitated money laundering. It had partnered with criminals. It had prioritized profit over legal and ethical obligations. And its governance was so broken that Crown could not be trusted to run a casino. The recommendation was clear. Crown Sydney's casino license should not be granted until Crown implemented sweeping reforms, replaced its board and senior management, and demonstrated sustained compliance with regulations. It was a death sentence. Crown Sydney, the $4 billion tower, could open as a hotel, but it could not operate as a casino. The very purpose of the building, the reason it existed, was denied. James Packer, who still owned a significant stake in Crown Resorts, watched his empire crumble. The company's stock price collapsed. His personal net worth dropped from $9 billion to under $4 billion. He had lost more than half his fortune in less than 5 years. But the Bergen Inquiry wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Other states launched their own investigations. Victoria's Royal Commission found similar problems at Crown Melbourne. Western Australia investigated Crown Perth. Every inquiry reached the same conclusion. Crown Resorts had failed, systematically, deliberately, and the people responsible needed to be held accountable. In March 2022, Crown Melbourne was fined $80 million, the largest fine ever imposed on an Australian casino. Crown Perth faced similar penalties. The company was forced to implement a compliance overhaul that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Senior executives were fired, board members resigned. And James Packer? He sold. In May 2022, Blackstone Group, an American private equity firm, acquired Crown Resorts for $8.9 billion. James Packer walked away with over $3 billion from the sale. He'd made money, technically, but everyone knew the truth. He'd sold because he had no choice, because his company was radioactive, because he couldn't fix what he'd broken. Crown Sydney remained closed as a casino. Blackstone tried to negotiate with regulators. They promised reforms. They hired compliance experts. They spent millions trying to prove the Crown could be trusted, but the New South Wales regulator would not budge, not yet. In June 2023, over 2 years after the Bergen report, Crown Sydney was finally granted conditional approval to open a restricted gaming floor, not a full casino. Just a small VIP room for high rollers, limited capacity, intense regulatory oversight. Nothing like what James Packer had envisioned. The grand opening of Crown Sydney's gaming floor was quiet. No celebrities, no fireworks, no speeches about dreams and ambition. Just a few dozen wealthy gamblers walking into a room to play baccarat, the most expensive casino in Australian history, reduced to a boutique gambling lounge. The Ghost Tower. If you visit Sydney today, you can see Crown Sydney from almost anywhere in the city. 75 stories of black glass reflecting the harbor. At night, it glows like a dark crystal, beautiful and ominous. Tourists take pictures. They ask what it is. Locals tell them it is a hotel. Some mention it is also a casino, technically, but not really. Inside, the building is immaculate. The hotel operates at near capacity. The restaurants are excellent. The bars are sleek. The luxury retail spaces are filled with high-end brands. By most measures, Crown Sydney is a success. It employs hundreds of people. It generates revenue. It serves a purpose. but it is not what it was supposed to be. The gaming floor, when it finally opened it, accounted for a tiny fraction of the building's operations. The high rollers James Packer bet everything on, they never came back. Not in the numbers that mattered. The Chinese government's crackdown on capital flight did not end. If anything, it got worse. And Crown's reputation among Asian whales was destroyed. Blackstone is making the best of it. They have repositioned Crown Sydney as a luxury hotel with limited gaming, not a casino resort. They have focused on corporate events, conferences, weddings. They are trying to turn a $4 billion casino into a $4 billion hotel. It is working, sort of. But it is not profitable the way a full casino would be. James Packer does not talk about Crown Sydney. He does not talk about much these days. After selling his stake in Crown Resorts, he largely disappeared from public life. He lives between Los Angeles and Sydney. He is still wealthy, worth over $3 billion, according to the most recent estimates. But he is not the mogul he once was. He is not chasing deals, building empires, proving his father wrong. In interviews, the rare ones he gives, James talks about mental health, about the pressure he felt, about the mistakes he made. He is reflective, almost apologetic. Nothing like the confident billionaire who thought he could conquer the casino world. There is a quote he gave in 2018 that haunts me. He was asked about his father's legacy, about the promise he made in 1991, and James said, "I spent my whole life trying to be someone I wasn't, trying to live up to a man I could never be. And in the end, I realized I didn't want to be him anyway." Maybe that is the real tragedy of Crown Sydney. Not that it failed as a casino, but that it represented everything James Packer thought he needed to prove. That he was as good as his father, that he could build something even bigger, that the Packer name meant something eternal. Crown Sydney proved the opposite. It proved that ambition without caution is just recklessness, that billion-dollar towers cannot fix broken systems, that legacy is a burden, not a blessing. Kerry Packer died believing his son was not tough enough to carry the family empire. James Packer spent 20 years trying to prove him wrong, and in the process, he built a $4 billion monument to that futile effort. The tower stands, the hotel operates, the limited casino floor takes bets from a handful of wealthy gamblers. But the dream? The dream is dead. And somewhere in Los Angeles or Sydney, James Packer looks at pictures of Crown Sydney and wonders if his father would be proud or if Kerry would just shake his head and say what he always said, "You're not ready, James. You never were." That 75-story tower still rises above Sydney Harbor, black glass reflecting the water, the opera house, the bridge. $4 billion of concrete and steel and shattered ambition. Crown Sydney operates today as a luxury hotel with a small gaming floor tucked away on the upper levels. Blackstone, the private equity firm that bought Crown Resorts, is making money. Not the kind of money James Packer envisioned. Not the billions that Chinese whales were supposed to deliver, but enough to keep the lights on, enough to justify the investment, enough to pretend it's not a failure. But it is a failure. Everyone knows it. The regulators know it. The casino industry knows it. And James Packer, sitting in his Los Angeles mansion or his Sydney penthouse, he knows it better than anyone. He's 77 years old now, still wealthy, still powerful in the way that billions of dollars make you powerful. But he's not building anything. He's not chasing deals. He's not trying to prove his father wrong anymore. Maybe because he finally realized the truth. Kerry Packer was never wrong about him, not in the way James thought. Kerry didn't think James was weak because he was soft or sensitive or anxious. Kerry thought James was weak because he cared too much about what Kerry thought. Because he spent his whole life trying to live up to a ghost instead of becoming his own man. And that's exactly what James did. He built Crown Sydney not because it made business sense, not because the timing was right, but because he needed a monument, something bigger than Kerry's Crown Melbourne, something that would make people forget he was just Kerry's son. Crown Sydney was supposed to be that monument. Instead, it became a tombstone, a marker for the death of the Packer gambling empire, for the end of James's ambition, for the final proof that some promises should never be made. In 2013, James Packer gave an interview where he talked about his father's death. He said the hardest part wasn't losing him. It was realizing I'd spent 38 years preparing to take over his life instead of building my own. Crown Sydney was supposed to change that, supposed to be the moment James finally stepped out of Carrie's shadow. But you can't outrun a shadow by building taller. You just make the shadow longer. So the tower stands, a hotel that wanted to be a casino, a monument that wanted to be a legacy, a son's dream that became his father's prophecy. $4 billion that proved Carrie Packer right one last time. The Chinese whales never came back. The gaming floor sits mostly empty. And James Packer, the richest son in Australia, learned what his father knew all along. In the end, the house always wins, even when the house is your own family. That was the story of Crown Sydney and James Packer. A $4 billion BET that the son could surpass the father. Some gambles you win, some you lose, and some you realize too late you never should have made. If you love discovering the real stories behind billion-dollar failures and the families that built them, hit subscribe. Because every empire has a story. And Vegas, Sydney, or anywhere else, the lessons are always the same.